Okay.
Hey Ali.
Hi Fee, thanks for joining us today. Can you tell us a little bit about you and your role?
So Claire and I founded Survivors in Transition nearly 13 years ago, and we decided to start it. It was started as a voluntary organisation that just provided peer support for women at that stage who'd experienced childhood sexual abuse. But it became apparent really quickly once we started delivering a service that lots of people needed lots of different things. So we started to think about it in a different way. And the service has grown to becoming a charitable incorporated organisation 5 or 6 years ago. We now employ 14 staff members, and we've got loads of different projects on the go. So it's really versatile, and I think one of the things I love the most about my job is how responsive we are to the needs of survivors, and what they bring to us and how that informs our service delivery as a team.
Sounds like lots of hard work.
It's lots of hard work, but it's hugely rewarding, and I think it's a privilege, really. We get to see people, come in and go through that transformation, in terms of just recognising that they can have a bit of their life back, and they don't have to carry the massive weight of sexual abuse with them. So that's a huge privilege to witness, actually.
Yeah. Awesome. And can you tell me, what is Tope? How did Tope come about?
So Claire and I have been thinking about working with young people for years. One of the things we've wanted to address at SIT is kind of the age of survivor that comes into the organisation. So over the last 4 or 5 years, we've recognised that the average age of service user at SIT was between the ages of 39 to 41. And what we've always wanted to do is to offer support to younger survivors much closer to the point of either their disclosure or the actual abuse, to ensure that, I suppose, they don't have to go through that 20 years in adulthood of kind of repeated services, going from one place to another, and kind of having the symptoms of their trauma dealt with, but not the sexual abuse itself. So that was the driver behind it. And I suppose it really gained impetus for me during COVID, particularly during lockdown. We recognised that lots of young people would be at home with their abusers potentially and not have any kind of outlet for that. So I suppose thinking about that and having that in our consciousness really kind of motivated us to get going with Tope. So it was a concept. What we decided to do initially was to talk to lots of young people about what they wanted, where the gaps were. We didn't want to duplicate anything that we already had out there, and there are lots of terrific services for young people. But one of the places we recognised there was a real gap, and we recognise this in adult survivors as well, is people of all genders, survivors of all genders who've never reported their abuse and never will, actually. So at SIT, probably 70% of the adults we work with have never reported their abuse to anyone in any position of authority, and I think that's significant. And what that says to me is there's lots of young people out there who are either experiencing sexual abuse or have experienced sexual abuse who are not going to tell anyone about it till much, much later in their life. And we want to ensure that's not the case. And it was really interesting when we started talking to young people. The consistent thing that sticks in my mind about that consultation was young people telling us there were a mix of young people who had reported their abuse and some who hadn't. And those who had talked about a really traumatic experience of reporting their abuse. So once they told someone in a position of authority, whether that was a teacher, a friend, a parent, they just said that everyone tended to panic. And it felt like several of them on several different occasions talked about a red button being pushed. And that's really stuck in my mind in terms of, I told someone this thing and it felt like the world around me really panicked and reacted to that. That was reported to safeguarding, it was reported to the police, everyone came rushing in. And then what they talked about was a sense of a loss of control over not only the process, but their experience, their ability to process what had happened to them. And what they talked about was just slowing that down a little bit and saying, if we had a bit more control over that process, what a difference that would have made. We also recognise that loads of young people who go through the criminal justice system, so who have reported their sexual abuse to the police, disengage from that process. To the point, actually, that some of the young people we talked to admitted to us that the process had got so much and they didn't know how to disengage from the process. So they had actually turned things around and said to someone, it didn't actually happen, I made it up. Now, to me, if that's the only way you can get out of a process that just feels that severe and you feel that out of control, that's really bad. Ultimately, at the end of the day, we all want justice for survivors of sexual violence. We want perpetrators to be brought to justice, but we're not going to get it done this way. We're not going to get it done unless people stay engaged in that process, feel like they have some control over their information and their experience. So we've got to think about doing things a different way, and that's how Tope came about, really.
Amazing, thank you. So you talk about sort of doing things differently than other organisations and really taking things at the young person's pace and with them in mind throughout
Absolutely.
the whole process. So what does Tope offer the young people that come to the service?
So what Tope offers is that opportunity to breathe and to think and to catch your breath and to be in control and to have some choice over what happens next. So it's that opportunity to tell someone about something really scary that's happened to you, something terrifying, something, you're breaking the secret, you're talking about something you've been forbidden to talk about or threatened to talk about. You're telling someone in a safe environment where we're promising you that we're not going to hit the red button. We're not going to react. We're not going to do anything without your consent. We're going to put you at the center of that and make decisions with you, about you, and for you. Rather than just saying, we think the right thing to do is X, Y, and Z. We're just going to slow that process down and work with you through that. And then, determined on everybody is different in terms of what they need. And I think what we're trying to do is create a really flexible service that can adapt to individuals' needs. And whilst we might be dealing with, people who've experienced sexual abuse or they've had a similar experience, it's going to be completely different for everybody. And I think everybody's response to that is going to be completely different. So what we need to do is meet people where they're at. Some people may have had loads and loads of therapy before coming to us about other things, and they may not have felt comfortable or confident to talk about their abuse. We're providing a comfortable space where that can happen. And then we're just going to take it at your pace. What we want to do is build a whole lot of interventions around that and ensure that almost we have a drop down of choices for different people, different kinds of therapists, different genders, different approaches, so that we can work with the individual at the center of that to offer them the best thing for them.
So Tope is a fairly new service, sort of born from the recent lockdowns that we've had. So what is the vision for the future? And I understand it's something you've just touched on there in terms of, those interventions that we can offer moving forward. But what is your vision for Tope? Where do you see that going?
I believe that Tope can become a national service over time, because I don't think anything else exists similar to it. But I think we've got to be slow and purposeful and let it organically grow over time. I don't think that we should rush it, and that's tempting because I know there's an enormous need out there. But we need to get it right, and we need to make sure that we're continually talking to young people and ensuring that we're offering what they need, not what we think they need, which I think as adults is sometimes something that we do a lot. We assume what young people need, or we assume they'll respond to a particular thing. What we need to start doing is just asking them.
They are the expert on them.
They are the expert on them, and they're the one who's experienced it, and they know how they feel. We've just got to give them a safe space where they can articulate that and talk about that so that we can respond to that in an effective way, so that they're not walking through survivors and transitions doors 20, 25, 40 years later, but they're getting the help that they need when they need it.
Yeah, that sounds really, really safe and really young person focused.
That's the idea.
Have there been any troubles setting up Tope? Any pushbacks from anywhere?
So that's a really interesting question, because I suppose when Claire and I first started thinking about Tope and thinking, We want to create a safe space where we can hold young people before they report. What are other professionals and stakeholders going to think about that? And I expected initially to get a lot of pushback from particularly safeguarding professionals, from police, people like that. But actually we've had none whatsoever, which I found really intriguing. And I think just reaffirms what we're doing is the right thing. I think that people recognise we're at a place where we need to start addressing this in a radically different way. Still being safe, still being really secure in what we offer, with a really clear governance structure around us and all of that kind of stuff. But I think fundamentally we have to do things differently, because what we're doing right now is not working. It's not working for young people. It's not fit for purpose in terms of, how we're treating them. Young people in 2022 are not the same as they were in 2012, and I think we need to acknowledge that.
So what does Tope actually mean?
So when we initially started talking to young people about what would we call such a service, quite a few of them, we spoke to 4 or 5 different groups. The words hold, tight, and hope kept coming up. So if we kind of did a word cloud of every conversation we had, those 3 words were quite prolific. And initially we were thinking of developing something around hope, but young people actually thought that was a bit naff. So then we talked about holding people tightly, and then we started talking about tight hope, and then we decided to call it Tope. Something short, something snappy. It doesn't mean anything else. It's not complicated. It just means tight hope. So what it means is we're going to hold you. That's going to be tight. It's going to be safe. But equally, that there is some hope for the future in terms of not having to hold on to the trauma or the sexual abuse for longer than is needed.
And it's got a great meaning, and it's also really easy to remember, and it's quick and it's simple and it's not overcomplicated, which is exactly the approach that Tope wants to take to support the young people.
That's exactly what we want to do. We want to create a brand that just kind of sticks in people's mind. And even when young people are talking to each other, we want them to be encouraging each other to say, I've experienced this thing, I'm not quite sure, is it abusive, isn't it? Does it constitute sexual abuse? I'm not quite sure. We want their mates to say to them, why don't you just get in touch with Tope? And you can do that in whatever medium is comfortable for you. I know I'm less comfortable picking up the phone or talking to someone than I am texting or emailing. So, do whatever's comfortable with you, but get in touch. And then we can pick it up from that point and help from there.
And what would your advice be to anybody who wants to make contact with the service? We've got a young person who has experienced sexual abuse. They feel that they're ready to talk about that, to open up and reach out and get that help. What would your advice be to them, Fee?
So I think if you're a young person who's experienced sexual abuse, or even you just feel that something's not quite right, just get in touch. There's loads of different ways you can get in touch with us. Just get in touch for we're not going to hold you to anything. You're not going to have to commit to a number of sessions. Initially, we don't even need to know your name. You can do that anonymously, but get in touch in the first instance and just, I've watched young people and even adults get in touch with our service, and just that opportunity to talk about what's happened to you. You see the weight drop off of people's shoulders, and that's what we want. We want to reduce some of the weight of the trauma that young people are experiencing. So don't delay. And I know, we've worked with adults in their 60s, 70s, even in their 80s, and I know that they would all say the same thing. They would all say, A, that they wish there was something similar that was available when they were young, and B, that they would have got in touch way, way sooner.
Thank you, Fee.
It's a pleasure. You're a good interviewer.